So obviously the main thing that we, obviously had was the room mic, so let's begin there. So in this session we've got a stereo room mic, and I think there might be a mono room mic as well, yep. And I didn't actually use the mono room mic in my mix. Just didn't feel it was necessary. Threw it up. There's actually a couple of other microphones in the original session which I didn't deliver to you guys because I didn't use them in my mix either. So I think just to save on...
I think that's a really good point. So I used to have a really big drum room with 32 inputs, and we would always use as many inputs as were available for rooms, even if they weren't going to be used. And so sometimes when we send these Nail the Mix sessions to students and some of them have lots of room mics, they're like, how am I going to make this work? And the answer is you don't have to. When you're recording, you should be exploring your space and trying to see what you've got and what you can get, but that doesn't mean you have to use it in the mix. And that's a perfect example right there.
I will always do exactly that. Like, I'll set up a bunch of room mics in most recordings, and inevitably I always just use a pair 80% of the time, I'd say. Yeah, or just a balance of a few of them. I definitely do exactly that. Try and capture as many, especially in new environments. You don't know where the correct position is, so you're better off throwing up a whole bunch of different microphones and having them to sift through later on, so you're not wasting time during the actual recording process. But the ones that I know that we spend a lot of time on were these two pair of M49s and Neumanns that we positioned right in the centre of the room to capture that split between the drums and the bass. So that was the main thing. The room mic probably would have been just in front of the drum kit, probably about 10 feet, pointed at the drum kit, but just felt unnecessary. And it kind of, the mono room mic, it kind of sucked down the stereo image of this huge wide room that I really like. So again, another reason I didn't use it in the mix. Hear the bass in there in the background. The mono room mic, just so you can hear. It might have been an old Sony or something, so it sounds very dirty as well. So it's got a bit of a gnarly sound to it. I've got a definite personal preference for big, wide room mics. I like stereo drums. I mean, there's plenty of rad-sounding mono sort of drum sounds going around, but I'm a sucker for the big, wide sound. So whenever I put up room mics, they're always a pair and they're always wide, minimum. I might experiment with close XY sort of positioned microphones, but the very basic set that I'll always put up is the widest sort of stereo room I can find in a particular drum room.
It's funny, when I first went through the tracks and I soloed the drums, I heard bass and I was like, what am I doing wrong here? Like, why can't I get the bass out of here? Like, where is there like a hidden bass track playing? Lo and behold, the bass was in the rooms. But I just want to point out to everyone that if you have a band that wants to record live, you should reference this. You don't have to show the band that, but you should reference this and just ask yourself, is this band tight enough? Were they as tight as Karnivool? Like, will the bass player be able to actually play in tune live with the drummer? Will it sound good? Because, this performance is fantastic. That's, if it wasn't fantastic, you wouldn't have been able to do this.
There was one section that had to be overdubbed for the bass because it was so technical and tricky to play. So we just, left that section out. He just didn't play during that section, and then we came back to it and overdubbed it just to get the performance 100% tight.
So you planned ahead for it.
Yeah. So just identifying those moments, perhaps in a song where you could approach a song with a band and say, let's record live with the bass in the room and capture the drums. I mean, and it's only a certain style of music, I think, that even suits. Or it's possible to do with. You're not going to do it with a lot of the metal bands. It needs to be a lot tighter than that. But in this instance, you can do it with the sort of alternative rock sound, much slower song. But you could take out bits that are perhaps tricky for the bass player to say, don't play the pre-chorus, don't play the bridge, but everything else play. And you can capture that sound and then go back and overdub the tricky parts, which is exactly what we did here. With
the room mic that has the bass in it, you also have a room mic on the bass, right? Like you have a bass room mic.
No, it's
okay.
Not actually, no, it's a reamp.
Okay.
It's not actually a room. It's just what the bass mic is getting is a bit of spill from the drums. So what we did is we captured the DI and we captured that. It would have been a combination of microphones on the bass cab in the room at the same time as the drums, and then we reamped while we had the setup. Everything, the bass sounding really good. We reamped the DI back through the bass cabinet, through the head and everything, all the pedals that he had going on, just to get a capture of it without the spill. So that's what the third channel is. It's very similar sound. Probably a little bit more dialed in, I guess. I'm pretty sure on the reamp process we actually put like a Manly Verimir on the bass signal before it hit the amplifier, just wanted to control it a little bit more so it's a little bit more thick when it hits the amp, and then just probably tweak the pedals a little bit more as well, maybe even punching in pedals manually as a reamp as well. So we were punching in pedals on the reamp as well, like it was, like a live performance. So you can hear at the end of the song here, there's distortion. Whereas early on in the song, it's a clean sound. And that was just to get, if I was going to add a lot of top end and a lot of brightness to the bass, it wasn't going to bring out all the cymbals. I think the spill from the drum kit into the bass mics is less desirable than the bass spilling into the drum mics. And like the bass is in all the drum mics really. Like if I solo the overheads, you're still going to hear quite a bit of bass in those as well. Maybe not a lot, but it's definitely in there. Yeah, so you can hear that the bass was through everything.
All right, so you were going to continue with your actual drum mics and stuff?
Yeah, so we had a wide stereo overhead setup, and we also had a stereo microphone. It would have been a Neumann, I can't remember the model name, but it was the dual capsule one. So this is the stereo Neumann microphone. It's a little bit more narrow, like it doesn't quite get the width that you get from an AB, which is a super wide position of the microphones on the overheads.
With that microphone, what was your goal? Were you trying to get like a complete kit picture? Because you just said it's not that wide.
I like to put up two sets of overheads just for flavour, for different flavour of the cymbals. But also I find that you get a very centred and strong snare through an XY setup of your overheads. So if it's not, in this instance it was this old Neumann stereo capsule microphone, but in other instances I'll put up two pencil condensers, like whether they're 451 AKGs or KM84s or something like that, to give a nice cymbal sound and a flavour. Pencil condensers are often very nice for that, but also it really centres the snare in your drum image. Whereas if you have just wide AB microphones where they're positioned far apart, so above like the left and the right crash cymbal, you've got to be super careful about getting them the same distance away from the snare drum so that the snare sound hits the microphone capsules at the same time, which centers the image and makes it stronger, but it's still a little bit phasey and weird. I mean, it can sound, it's really dependent on the drummer's setup, but it can sound a little bit strange sometimes. So having that center XY overhead microphone setup, I find just solidifies it a little bit more. And of course, it's just a preference thing when you're mixing. You don't have to use one or the other, but I just like to capture both of them. So that was the thinking behind having the two sets of overhead.
Do you ever use them at the same time?
Yes.
Okay. So it could be either or both?
Yes.
Okay.
So in this instance, I remember not actually particularly liking the tone of the stereo capsule Neumann. That was the XY setup in this mix. It's still being used in my mix, but it's a lot softer compared to the wide AB mics, which I think were 414s of some description. So I'll play those now. You can hear that it's a much stronger cymbal sound because they're directly over the cymbals, whereas the center, the XY microphone, is over the drummer, so it's a bit further away from the cymbals. But what I try to do when I set all these 3 or 4 microphones up is measure it all from the center of the snare, so that when the snare is hitting all the microphones, they're all being, the snare's being heard at the same time, so there's no phasey or delay issues with the snare sound.